automotive world, when a manufacturer sets out to create a new model, they hope not just to look a few years down the road or even around the corner, but really a plan of decades to come, hoping the vehicle truly culminates to a brand identity, brand awareness, and really come to its fruition. Such is the case as this option behind me. Hey, welcome to the Station Road Warrior. I'm your host, Grant Roberson. Now, what we have is the 2020 Chevrolet Corvette, and while this particular model is a quantum leap from last year, it is a culmination of all the decades before it. Certainly the Corvette by no means is a new model over at Chevrolet, debuting all the way back in 1953, this being the 8th generation, aka the C8. And with that, you would think that, well, this is a new concept, a new idea, something revolutionary, new to the brand. But, well, that would be far from the case. Engineers, designers from the early days knew this is where they wanted this vehicle to go. It just took us a few years to get there. Now, General Motors claims that this is still unmistakably a Corvette from the outside, but most onlookers were just that, mistaken, associating with more of a McLaren, Ferrari, or even Lamborghini, and only when they saw the name of the back were they corrected. But when it comes to design, it all starts with the new location of the engine, the focal point of this design, and really the heart of this generation. And it really looks like a jewel sitting in a case wanting to be marveled at. And even the people that walked around all ended up here and just gazed at it for a few minutes. If you're a gearhead and car enthusiast, this isn't the first time you've seen this design. You don't need me to point out the obvious, but you can tell General Motors really drew from the aviation world. F-22, F-35s, even Formula One. Broad rear stance, wings that look like they're tucked back, rated on full, low to the ground, aggressive front end, all this air infused on the side, all that put together, well, it's just not last year's model. Now, when it comes to overall coupe numbers, this vehicle fits right in, about 182 inches overall, wheelbase around about 107. Width, not too shabby at 76 inches, but height, a whopping 4 feet. Now, ground clearance undisclosed, but well, you can tell it's just skimming the ground. And one thing you want to watch for is, well, road harshness. No, not just at the parking lots, but the little dips and undulations, because it can provide a little bit of an impact there on the front end. But what's great is, all new for this model year, is the rise capability of the front. Just like we see in the exotic cars, press of a button on the dash, this will increase by about 1.5 inches, which doesn't seem like much, but when your ground clearance is probably 3 or 4 inches, that extra nearly 2 inches gives you just enough lift, well, to minimize the scrapes and dings. When it comes to guerrilla warfare, there's not just one aspect here at the front end, but really the overall package that sets the tone, really giving a nice aggressive look, inspired from fighter jets and Formula One with the overall aerodynamics. Now, the design really culminates with the fact that the engine is moved to the middle, allowing engineers to lower the overall look, giving much better visual appeal behind the wheel. Other aspects, of course, is the chiseling, the raised lines, the raised haunches on the outer side, aggressive headlight assembly, as well as the bedazzling that goes around the side. Now, as you sweep down, it looks like the hood almost touches the ground, but then you get this kind of blunt force trauma here in the middle with all the air induction filling the radiator and the glossy and dual tones up front. The lower fascia really getting almost all the way down to the ground. Now, one point I do like is the body color stops here, and you get kind of this rubber cladding down below, what I refer to as the warning noise. Basically, when you hear this rubbing, well, that means you need to raise this front end. Now, when you own a Corvette, it's not always just about the 0 to 60 numbers or testing out the top end speed, but sometimes it's your daily driver or making it your weekend warrior. And I'd argue that by moving the engine from the front to the middle, well, Chevy just may have perfected it by not delivering just one trunk, but two. Now, typically here at the front end, I'd pop the front to show you the horsepower that awaits, but in this case, well, it's more about cargo. Now, the way you get there is just simply pressing the key fob button twice, a long hold, and it pops right open. And the area you'll see here is just enough to maybe hold a small bag or small luggage. Now there's great illumination for this trunk area space, as well as a power supply, also emergency release, which is glow in the dark. So if there is someone that is small enough to climb inside and get stuck, well, they can release it. Typical emergency release you'll find on any of these areas. Now what you're going to see combined with the front trunk space and back is just over 12 cubic feet. And what you're going to see in the back is decent acreage, really handling the weekend warrior luggage and overnight items quite well, most of it going here. And as you can tell, quite cavernous there to the back, and that's so you can handle that roof panel that's going to fit in just like that. All Corvettes for 2020 have kind of an open air feel, really having this hard top design, but right through here, this removable panel. Now, where does that removable panel go? Well, right here in the trunk, so it had to be just big enough to handle it with ease, and I'll show you that in just a second. Now, swinging around to the back, naturally here on the key fob, a release for the front, got a release in the back, double tap, it pops right up. You also have a nice electronic release right through here. Now, once it pops up, you're gonna find a nice, huge hatch that rises to the occasion, once again, revealing the jewel underneath here. Now to close the rear hatch, you do have this built-in handle, but I prefer just to place my hand lightly on the top, ease it down. Now you do have a little bit of automation at this point. Once you get it to the locking mechanism, just lightly press. Once the vehicle notices it, it's going to cinch it down and close it automatically. Now at the four corners, you're going to find 245/35 wrapping a 19-inch wheel up front, 305/30s wrapping a 20-inch here at the back end. Now it's all about airflow on this vehicle. You can certainly see that the back end acting like wings, but also engulfing the air just the same. Here on the side as well in the front, really on the outer side, venting out there around the wheel wells. Now, once the top is off, this vehicle has a whole different feel. Again, Ferrari S, you can think back to the Magnum PI days. If this was red and I had a mustache and maybe some more hair, you could kind of have a nostalgic feel. But nonetheless, really a nice two aggressive looks, hard top or remove. Now, one thing to note, there is a convertible version as well. Now, when it comes to ingress, a lot of my, well, people that had a learning curve really couldn't figure out where the handle was. And I like that the handles don't detract from the overall look. Built in right to this area right here with a nice electronic release. Just simply press it, opens right up, really giving you tons of ingress. Now, one thing to note with my overall 6-foot frame, I do like when the top is off because I can just slide right in. Last but not least is what lies beneath here, specifically a 6.2 liter small block V8, delivers around about 495 horses and 470 foot-pounds of torque. But the bigger number, or should I say small, is 0 to 60 in under 3 seconds with a top end speed of around about 184 miles per hour. Now this particular model comes with the Z51 package with some extra add-ons as well, taking the base price of around about $59,000 to around about $83,000 as you see it. Now, one thing to note, I've heard that dealerships are adding kind of a markup to their number, pushing this vehicle in some cases to over $100,000. But if you do your research and find, well, the right dealer, you might be able to walk away with a bargain and only pay MSRP. Also to note, well, there is kind of a waiting list, so make sure you go ahead and we'll send them an email. Fighter jet and Formula One inspiration isn't just found on the outside, but also on the inside, specifically with the driver-centric overall feel. Now, first off, legroom numbers around about 42 inches. Plenty of room for my 6-foot 2-inch frame. Now, one thing to note, obviously, with the mid-engine design, not going to get a lot of reclinability with the seat back, but still plenty of overall comfort also to be expected. Bolstering on the sides so the vehicle really snugs you in, but I didn't find it too encapsulating, so it seems to be kind of universal fit for most individuals. Now, as for getting inside, what you're going to find on the outside is that electronic release. We've seen this on other models. You also find just a simple button here as well. Just press right there, electronic release. Now, of course, if there is power failure, you always have the manual pull here to open the door. Racing inspiration can be found on the steering wheel, not just in the form of the paddle shifters, but also the sawed-off bottom and top of the steering wheel, giving it a nice Formula One feel. In a fighter jet, the importance of a co-pilot goes without saying, but here in the driver-centric Corvette cockpit, well, you'd argue that the passenger feels a little distant, mainly because everything is so towards the driver. First off, with the controls right through the middle, almost acting like a divide, and also somewhat angled to the driver. The infotainment system, again, angled. Heck, the passenger is almost going to have to peek over to kind of get a gist of what's going on. Now, taking a little closer look at what's going on here, you're going to have dual zones up front with the driver up top, nice toggle switches, heated and cooled seats, as well as the syncability for the dual zones. As you sweep down, real simple controls for mode select, as well as a toggle for the fan speed. Even further down, on, off, and other mode selects, and then eventually again you get down to the passenger. But as I said, this is angled just a hair, so they might have to just do it by the old touch and feel method, because it's going to take a little peering over to get the gist of what's going on. Adding insult to injury, what the passenger is going to find again with this divide is a little bit difficulty getting to the center cup holders. Now, to make everything nice and sleek, there is a cover. Just simply press, reveals dual cup holders. What you're also going to find is a center console. Once again, once it's open, that's going to open towards the passenger and pretty much hide all the contents from them. But what you're going to find is 2 USB connections and an auxiliary jack, and it is lit up just a little bit by that lighting. Now, if you prefer the clutch dance, unfortunately for 2020, there is no manual, but you do have a dual clutch automatic transmission with these nice integrated switches. Really streamlines the overall look. Push button for park, toggle for reverse and drive, and again, push there for neutral. Neutral is really helpful if you just want to kind of rev the engine and show off those quad pipes. What you also find right here is a nice resting point, what I found for my hand, that really allows you to interact with the infotainment system and give you a resting spot. But there's also something more important going on right here. I don't want to overstate it, but the Corvette truly is designed around the pilot. Everything exactly where you want it, ergonomically feeling great. Especially this area right here is kind of where your hands just naturally going to fall, and again gives you a nice resting spot to interact with the infotainment, but also most importantly interact with this toggle down below. Now, at first I thought it related to the screen, but instead it relates to the gauge cluster. And as you can tell right now, I'm in the weather mode, like the winter mode, helps you drive in slippery situations. But if I toggle the screen, what you're going to see is the different modes. This specifically is my mode. If I set them up custom, keep going, the digital cluster is going to change. I'm going to go to tour mode, a little bit more comfortable everyday driving. As I keep going, this is a sport mode, start to get those RPMs going, and most importantly, the heartbeats. And lastly is track mode. And once you get to these modes, you're going to see the digital interface truly change, giving you lots of information related to the driving mode you're in, far from the old analog gauge cluster we're used to. Now, certainly you can scroll through the driving modes right here, but one important one is that customizable mode select, which allows you to set all the settings that you prefer. And the best part is you don't have to interact with that, but instead the shortcut right here on the steering wheel, just simply press this button and the gauge cluster transforms and lets you know that you're in your personal driving mode, and well, just stomp the gas and hold on. On the steering wheel, you're going to find tons of controls. First off, the paddle shifters, down on the left, up on the right, as well as cruise control over here. Tune select behind, down low, and volume on the right. And I like the fact that they kind of act like paddle shifters in the same operation. Just simply keep your hand here and lightly press up and down, as well as over here on the volume. Over on the right, you have heated steering wheel, as well as your Bluetooth phone connectivity, and the controls to change the gauge cluster information up top. Heads-up driving is always important, and heads-up display makes it so much simpler. And depending on what driving mode you're in, you got all the information you need reflected right there on the windshield. Now, when you're backing up, this vehicle has a nice backup camera and backup sensors, allows you to really kind of prevent any scratches and dings. You're also going to naturally use your backup mirror, but one thing to note with the overall design of this vehicle, really doesn't work very well with the overall blind spots. But what I like is, well, Chevy fixed that with a backup camera that relates to the mirror, give you a nice view. You can obviously go through some settings and change the angles and overall look, but it's there, it gives you another view, and perfect. Now, I mentioned earlier about the low overhang of the front end and the scratch and ding potentials, but what I like is this bird's eye view that allows you to creep into any close spots and see exactly before you get to the touchy points. Now, another area to charge is right between the front occupants. Slide your phone right in here, wirelessly charges it right up. to help keep the cabin nice and quiet. It goes without saying that this glass between you and the engine really does the job. You can still hear a modest rumble, even more so when the top and the windows are down, but when you just want that peace and quiet, this glass really pays dividends. When redesigning a model, it doesn't happen overnight, and in some cases it can take decades to get here, and when it finally arrives, well, it was worth the wait. The 2020 Corvette really setting the tone and, well, setting the next generations to come by simply, well, moving the engine from here to there. And if you think that's simple, well, it's just not the case. Now, as always, thank you for watching this edition of Road Warrior. Keep both hands on the wheel and eyes straight ahead.